You Won't See This in the News frankly discusses certain subjects that the mainstream media either ignore or censor, but which are vitally important to every American, most of whom are kept uninformed as a result. The purpose of this video is to expose this censorship, reveal some of what the media are concealing, and demonstrate how they are manipulating us. We guarantee that some of the information in this video will be new to you. After watching part 1, do not assume that parts 2 and 3 are any less startling. Do not skip around if this is your first viewing. Please watch it from start to finish in sequence. Some of this information is very disturbing, but this is not to cause despair or hopelessness. On the contrary, we offer a very viable solution to the situation we describe. The creators of this video do not expect you to accept or reject this information solely on the basis of viewing it, but urge you to conduct your own independent research. Welcome to You Won't See This in the News with your hosts, Rick and Dick. I'm Rick, and you must be Dick. Say hello, Dick.
Hello, Rick.
Not to me, to the viewers.
Oh, hello.
Good. Now we can begin. Dick, quotations are something of a specialty of yours. Now, do you have one that succinctly describes the general theme of You Won't See This in the News?
Yes, I do.
Well?
I have a great quote.
And?
And what?
Are you going to read it?
Oh, you didn't say that.
I thought it was implicit.
Here's the quote. It's from A.J. Liebling, an American journalist who frequently wrote for The New Yorker for many years.
Wait a minute. Let's put it up on the screen.
Freedom of the press is guaranteed only to those who own one.
That's it? Those 12 words?
What's wrong with them? That's the theme of You Won't See This in the News.
Well, I've got 204 words to your 12, Dick, and they're right from the congressional record.
This better be good.
In March 1915, the J.P. Morgan interests, the steel, shipbuilding, and powder interests, and their subsidiary organizations, got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States, and sufficient number of them to control, generally, the policy of the daily press of the United States. These 12 men worked the problem out by selecting 179 newspapers, and then began, by an elimination process, to retain only those necessary for the purpose of controlling the general policy of the daily press throughout the country. They found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. The 25 papers were agreed upon. Emissaries were sent to purchase the policy, national and international, of these papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought, to be paid for by the month. An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit information regarding the questions of preparedness, militarism, financial policies, and other things of national and international nature considered vital to the interests of the purchasers.
That's an incredible statement. All right, Rick, you win. But before you pick up the marbles, one question comes to mind. Why did the bankers want to buy out the big newspapers?
Well, Dick, 1915 was a long time ago, but we're going to show that this buyout was part of a conspiracy of monumental proportions, and we'll refer back to it many times.
In the intervening 90 years, the breadth of this conspiracy has only gotten worse, much worse. The bankers controlled the media then, and they control it now, all with a heavy hand of censorship. We are going to demonstrate exactly how they have captured control of the media and what their true motivation is.
And we will show you how this media control has diluted your freedom and prosperity, and what you can do to restore them and return our country to its constitutional foundations. We are going to address these and other issues in this video.
Which other issues?
Whichever ones come up.
But there's no one to raise them.
What do you mean? Someone in the studio audience will probably have an issue to discuss.
That's impossible.
Why?
Because there isn't any studio audience.
You know, I wondered why it was so quiet out there. I thought they were just being respectful. All right then, how about the cameraman, the electrician, the crew? One of them might have a question.
There's no crew, Rick. It's just us.
Well, Dick, I hope someone is watching, because the media certainly aren't going to tell anyone what we're going to talk about.
Unfortunately, that's true. The media have gone from their traditional role of watchdog to lapdog, and it censors as much by what they do report as what they don't report. So we will be describing the very significant role the mass media have played and continue to play in controlling our lives and supporting a hidden agenda.
And you will see why you won't see this in the news. Speaking of a hidden agenda, Dick, in 2006 you played me a speech you had written and recorded. It was about the people who stay in the background, out of the public eye, but who essentially control national governments as well as the mass media in their drive to create a global empire, a world government.
Do you mean the sort of people who would buy out 25 newspapers to, quote, properly supervise and edit information regarding things of national and international nature considered vital, unquote, to their interests?
That and more. You called it CFR plus Bilderberg equals treason. Well, it's not exactly E equals MC squared, and it's too long for our show, but perhaps we can bring out some of the highlights.
So again, my work ends up on the cutting room floor.
The ultimate sacrifice of all artists.
That should be great artists.
Don't push it, Dick. Let's hold off on the subject of treason for a moment. I'm not sure if all of our viewers can accept that treason is committed on a daily basis in this country. At least not yet, anyway. But we can talk about world government because that sounds like a good thing.
It sure does. In fact, some people may ask, what is wrong with the world government? The answer is that if it had a constitution, a Bill of Rights, and a system of checks and balances that limited government, as our Constitution does, then a world government might be a good idea. A single government instead of hundreds or thousands of individual jurisdictions, a single currency, army, police force, banking system, these all might be very beneficial to mankind. But there are absolutely insurmountable problems with moving from the guarantees and freedoms we enjoy to a world government providing those same guarantees and freedoms.
Can you give me some examples of those problems?
Perhaps I can do so better in the form of questions.
Who is leading the movement to create a world government? Why is this movement operating in such secrecy? Why is it not discussed in the national media? Would every citizen in the world vote for the government leaders? Would civilians command the armed forces? How will we react if the world government sends its military into the United States to restore order in a troubled area?
Most people would probably first ask, what makes you think a world government is being created in secret?
Then I would respond with the evidence. A man's intentions are known by his deeds, not his words. And there are plenty of deeds proving that we are in the very advanced stages of a world government, even if most Americans are unaware of it. There are a number of, by invitation only, secret organizations dedicated to this goal, including the Trilateral Commission, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Skull and Bones, and others. But to simplify things, let's look at two organizations and a few individuals who are spearheading the drive for world government. One such organization is the Council on Foreign Relations,
also known as the CFR, which is not to be confused with the Code of Federal Regulations.
The CFR describes itself as an organization that conducts research on international subjects. Its tagline on the CFR website is, a nonpartisan resource for information and analysis. 7 words which really say nothing at all. The CFR publishes a variety of reports on the results of that research. It claims that it has no official relationship with the government, but the evidence clearly indicates that this claim is an outrageous lie. The CFR was created in 1921. Its millionaire founding president was J.P. Morgan's personal attorney, and its founding vice president's law firm represented the Morgan interests.
And according to the congressional record, it was representatives of Morgan interests who bought out the 25 most influential newspapers in 1915. That buyout paid dividends immediately.
How so?
Remember the Lusitania?
I thought it was Remember the Maine.
Well, that was 1898, and the sinking of the Maine led to the Spanish-American War. The sinking of the Lusitania was in 1915 and led to the United States entering World War I.
But the United States didn't enter the war until 1917.
Well, Dick, it took a while for the men behind the scenes to make it happen. The key device for getting America into the war was the sinking of the Lusitania. Kept hidden from the public was the fact that the ship, which was a passenger vessel, was carrying 6 million rounds of ammunition to Britain. President Wilson made sure that the cargo of ammunition was kept secret by ordering the ship's manifest be locked away in the U.S. Treasury's archives. Furthermore, the British had broken Germany's naval code and therefore knew approximately where the U-boats patrolling the British Isles were located. British Commander Joseph Kenworthy later said,
"The Lusitania was deliberately sent at considerably reduced speed into an area where a U-boat was known to be waiting, and with their escorts withdrawn." That the Lusitania's cargo included military equipment and munitions was a violation of the Neutrality Act. The German embassy in Washington tried to warn American civilians against sailing on the Lusitania by placing this advertisement in 50 prominent U.S. newspapers, mostly along the eastern seaboard. The U.S. State Department threatened each paper with libel suits if it printed this ad. Only one publication, the Des Moines Register, had the courage to run the ad despite the threat, which is why we have a copy of it today. Unfortunately, a paper in Des Moines, Iowa, was not likely to have been seen by people boarding the ship in New York. On May 7, 1915, a German U-boat torpedo struck the Lusitania, and it sank in only 18 minutes, sending almost 1,200 people to their death, 128 of whom were Americans. The globalists used their buyout of the 25 major newspapers to ensure that the general public would never know the true facts of the Lusitania sinking. At the same time, they used the press to foment anti-German sentiment so Americans would want to go to war. And that, in a nutshell, is how the United States entered World War I in 1917, just 4 years before the formation of the CFR.
The CFR meetings are held at the elegant four-story Harold Pratt House on East 68th Street in New York. The building was donated to the CFR by Harold Pratt's widow. Pratt was a director of Standard Oil of New Jersey, which is now Exxon Mobil. Standard Oil was owned by John D. Rockefeller, and the Rockefellers and the J.P. Morgan Bank today are one and the same entity. The Morgan Bank has spent many millions of dollars over the years to support the CFR. CFR membership is by invitation only, and don't expect an invitation unless you have a lot of money, national security expertise, CIA experience, service in one of the 3 branches of government, are employed by Columbia University, or have clout with the media.
Darn, I just missed.
Which one?
All of them.
Well, then don't sit waiting by the phone. They hold frequent meetings and dinners, which are closed to the public, but which feature a speech by a guest, usually a ranking statesman from Washington or a foreign country, followed by a discussion with members. These meetings follow the rule of non-attribution, meaning that everything is off the record. Violation of that rule is considered grounds for dismissal from the CFR.
Okay, so who gets invitations? Are you going to name names?
Well, President George W. Bush addressed the CFR on December 7, 2005 on the subject of the war in Iraq. I wonder if he made his appearance by landing on the roof of CFR headquarters in a helicopter dressed in a flight suit.
Probably not. There would have been no media coverage because it was a CFR meeting.
Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld also addressed CFR meetings on 2 separate occasions. Nearly all Democratic and Republican candidates for the office of president since the 1940s have been CFR members, including John Kerry, but not George W. Bush.
Ronald Reagan was not a CFR member either, but he was surrounded by CFR people, just like Bush. As for the 2008 presidential candidates, CFR membership is a red flag to inform voters.
So, while only 4 of the candidates are CFR members, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans,
8 have written at least one article or essay for the CFR publication Foreign Affairs, 5 Democrats and 3 Republicans.
7 have made at least one speech before the council, 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans.
7 have policy advisors who are CFR members, 3 Democrats and 4 Republicans.
To top it off, 2 have attended at least one Bilderberg meeting, but we'll talk about that later.
Oh, what a tangled web they weave, Dick. But it's important to note that Mike Gravel, Dennis Kucinich, Tom Tancredo, Duncan Hunter, and Ron Paul have no known CFR connections. In fact, Ron Paul has stated that if elected president, he would have nothing to do with the CFR.
Other presidents who are or have been CFR members include Hoover, Eisenhower, JFK, Nixon, Carter, and Clinton. George Bush Sr. appeared on the CFR membership roster in 1979, but his name has since mysteriously disappeared from that document. Every Secretary of State since 1949 has been a CFR member. The CIA has been under CFR control almost continuously since its inception, starting with Allen Dulles, a founding member of the CFR.
Dick, just how big is the CFR membership?
The 2005 CFR membership roster includes 4,275 members. The following shows how many current or former CFR members hold or recently held key positions of influence within principal American companies, institutions, and other influential organizations. 13 CFR members represent K Street lobbying firms, with combined annual expenditures for their firms in excess of $320 million. 16 CFR members represent the federal judiciary, including 10 district judges and 2 sitting Supreme Court judges, Ruth Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer. More than 20 CFR members belong to Yale's Skull and Bones. 23 CFR members represent energy firms such as ExxonMobil. 25 CFR members represent the Federal Reserve System, including former Chairman Alan Greenspan and former Chairman Paul Volcker. 70 CFR members represent foundations and trusts. 82 CFR members are or were formerly members of the United States Congress. 84 CFR members represent banking organizations, such as J.P. Morgan. 109 CFR members represent finance companies, such as Morgan Stanley. 130 CFR members are in or are retired from the United States military, including 77 generals and 20 admirals. 152 CFR members represent big business, such as Boeing. 173 CFR members are or were university and college presidents, chancellors, and deans. 204 CFR members are or were ambassadors. 298 CFR members are or were high-ranking officials in general government, including intelligence and national security. 361 CFR members are or were university and college professors. And so, it is apparent that the CFR is an executive staffing agency that puts people in positions of power and control who will implement and promote the CFR agenda. CFR members also include 3 Rockefellers, Henry Kissinger, the National Basketball Association Commissioner, New York City former Mayor David Dinkins, New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, Caroline Bouvier Kennedy, and Vice President Dick Cheney. Let us now watch Dick Cheney addressing a CFR meeting.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
That's an incredible statement. Let's watch it again.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
There it is, for all the world to see. The Vice President of the United States, a man with no integrity whatsoever. The other 2,500 members are scattered about in key positions in centers of influence, which is how they exert and maintain their control over their subjects, we the people.
The CFR is actually a semi-private group. It maintains a public face, but conducts its business in secret. Its house organ, Foreign Affairs, published since 1922, is what the CFR website calls America's most influential publication on international affairs and foreign policy.
The word foreign in the CFR name causes us to smile because it doesn't jive with its membership profile. What do federal district judges, the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, a number of state governors, a sports commissioner, the author of a book about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, and hundreds of lesser-known CFR members have to do with foreign affairs? What are the 13 members of lobbying firms doing as CFR members? Isn't it against the law for foreign countries to lobby Congress? And if they do not lobby for foreign countries, why do they belong to the CFR, an organization supposedly dedicated to foreign policy? Why should CFR people be briefed by government officials on information not available to the general public, especially since it can be financially advantageous to CFR members?
It sure sounds like the CFR is the ultimate old boys club.
It certainly seems that way. The CFR has been the chief recruiting ground for cabinet-level officials in Washington for decades. Almost half of all CFR members have been invited to assume official government positions or to act as consultants at one time or another. During the last change in the Supreme Court, only CFR members appeared on the short list of 5 candidates considered for the vacated position. Because the CFR does an end run around our Constitution, it is known as our shadow government. And because the Rockefellers run the CFR, it is the Rockefellers, not our Congress, who control the U.S. government.
Now, isn't it true that the covert focus of the CFR was for many years on promoting a world government in a fashion similar to the Bilderberg Group, but that recently it has reduced its world government aspirations?
That's right. But 16 present CFR members are also members of the Bilderberg Group, including David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger.
Well, maybe it's time to talk about the Bilderberg Group.
The Bilderberg Group is named for the Hotel de Bilderberg in the Netherlands, where the first meeting was held in 1954.
And why was it formed, Dick?
Well, David Rockefeller was the founder of the Bilderberg Group. That should tell you something about it.
Okay, go on. What is its mission?
Its mission is to create a world government. And in the process of doing so, the United States will lose its Constitution, Bill of Rights, and sovereignty. In 1950, just 4 years before the Bilderberg Group was formed, James Warburg testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He said,
"We shall have world government, whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent."
So the obvious question is, if the American people do not consent to the termination of our sovereignty and the abandonment of our Constitution, who will conquer us to bring it about by force? Will it be by an army financed by the trillions of dollars the Federal Reserve bankers have cheated us out of? The same elites who force the income tax upon us so that the money to pay the interest to those bankers is stolen from the American people?
the answer to those questions are not so obvious. But understanding how the Bilderberg Group conducts business may shed some light. Annual meetings are held at various sites around the world. For security purposes, they are held at different times and places. The most recent meeting was held at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Istanbul, Turkey.
The world's powerful elite arrive at the Bilderberg meetings in black limousines, sporting bulletproof glass. Attendees like Hillary Clinton, who do not wish to be seen under any circumstances, are whisked away to the hotel underground garage.
Bilderberg secrecy precautions make those of the CFR look like a Cub Scout initiation by comparison. The responsibility for security for these meetings is in the hands of the government of the country in which the meetings are held. They must supply military guards, Secret Service, national and local police, and private security personnel to protect the privacy and safety of these very powerful international elite members, who are not required to conform to regulations that private citizens are subject to, such as customs searches, visa requirements, or public notice of their meetings. When they meet, no outsiders are allowed in or near the building. They bring their own cooks, waiters, telephone operators, housekeepers, and bodyguards.
Shades of the secret meeting at Jekyll Island in 1910 to create the Federal Reserve Act. So, who goes to these meetings?
Perhaps Daniel Esterlin, who has researched the Bilderberg Group for more than 15 years, describes them best.
Since 1954, the Bilderbergers have represented the elite and the absolute wealth of all Western nations. Financiers, industrialists, bankers, politicians, business leaders of multinational corporations, presidents, prime ministers, finance ministers, state secretaries, World Bank and International Money Fund representatives, presidents of world media conglomerates, and military leaders.
Aren't there about 80 who have gone to every meeting for years?
Yes, those are the regulars. But others are invited to speak because they have expertise in a particular field, but they have no knowledge of the group's true purpose. Still others are invited as recruits, whom the Bilderbergers will help to attain elected positions of great power, including the presidency of the United States, to help advance the Bilderberg agenda.
So if they aren't already corrupt, they are thought to be corruptible.
That pretty much covers it.
A partial list of notable Bilderberg attendees includes: David Rockefeller has attended all meetings since 1954. President Bill Clinton, 1991, Germany. Donald Rumsfeld, 1975 and 2002. Tony Blair, 1993, Greece. Margaret Thatcher, 1975. Henry Kissinger, 2004, 5, 6, and 7. Melinda Gates, wife of Bill Gates, 2004. 3 different Canadian prime ministers. George Pataki, New York governor, 2006. Katharine Graham, Washington Post owner, attended many meetings. Presidential candidate Chris Dodd has attended 3 meetings. Many heads of large corporations, particularly those representing oil companies, have attended Bilderberg meetings.
Didn't Hillary Clinton attend a Bilderberg meeting?
Presidential candidate Hillary Clinton attended Bilderberg meetings in 1997 and 2006. On at least 2 occasions, she has been asked in public to comment on her involvement with Bilderberg. Each time, she recoiled in fear and tried to get away as quickly as she could. In one case, her bodyguards used strong-arm tactics to prevent a simple question from being asked of her about it.
Fancy that, Dick. A U.S. senator and presidential candidate doesn't want the public to know that she's been to Bilderberg meetings and uses her guard dogs to stifle our right to free speech in asking about them. We didn't read about these facts in the major newspapers or see it on television, did we?
Not at all.
And why is that?
Because the CFR controls the media.
And that's why you won't see this in the news.
Now imagine Hillary taking an oath on the Bible to uphold the Constitution, while at the same time plotting with the Bilderbergers to destroy it.
I could have done without that image, Dick.
And let's not forget about Rupert Murdoch, who owns an enormous national media empire. Murdoch attended the 2006 Bilderberg meeting in Canada. So,
But don't tell me, Dick, not one of the news outlets within his media monopoly has uttered a single word about Bilderberg, least of all Fox News.
particularly Fox News. Not a word of what is said at Bilderberg meetings can be breathed outside. No reporters are invited in, and no information is to get out. While confidential minutes of meetings are taken, names are not noted.
That's it, Dick.
What's it?
That's why Fox News doesn't cover the Bilderbergs.
Why?
Well, you just said no reporters are invited there. How can you report the news when your reporters aren't allowed to see it?
I picked a heck of a week to stop taking my antidepressants.
Just kidding, Dick.
So was I.
So, how do we know what we know about the Bilderberg Group, Dick?
Since it's so secretive, most of what we know about the group comes from leaks and independent investigators. For example, activist Tony Gosling, a former British journalist who runs a campaign against the Bilderberg Group, noted, "One of the first places I heard about the determination of U.S. forces to attack Iraq was from leaks that came out of the 2002 Bilderberg meeting."
And well, here's another example of a leak.
Henry Kissinger made this statement at a Bilderberg meeting held in Evian, France, but he was unaware that the speech was being taped by a Swiss delegate to the meeting.
Today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government.
That statement was made in 1992, 9 years before 9/11.
Tyrants have long used fear as a tactic for acquiring more power. Hermann Goering, Hitler's second-in-command, said, "Naturally, the common people don't want war, but after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy, or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country."
And Soviet Russian dictator Joseph Stalin said, "The easiest way to gain control of the population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened."
That's worth repeating, Dick.
The easiest way to gain control of the population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened.
Dick, when they use acts of terror to gain control of entire populations, one may wonder what the purpose of that control is. Well, that purpose was expressed by David Rockefeller, who said, "We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order."
In addition to leaks, we have learned about the agendas of these secret groups from the insiders themselves.
Such as Rear Admiral Chester Ward, who was a member of the CFR for 16 years. He warned the American people of the CFR's intentions. The most powerful clique in these elitist groups have one objective in common. They want to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty of the national independence of the United States. A second clique of international members in the CFR comprises the Wall Street international bankers and their key agents. Primarily, they want the world banking monopoly from whatever power ends up in the control of global government.
Just about everything that the CFR and Bilderberg people do is treasonous, especially the way the CFR acts as a shadow government. Only the Congress is empowered by the Constitution to make our laws. But the Rockefellers control the CFR, which in turn controls the Congress.
And most members of Congress, besides obeying the dictates of the big bankers, are wined and dined by 34,000 K Street lobbyists who represent big business and special interest groups. This is treason because they, the Congress and the lobbyists, are adhering to the enemies of the United States Republic. That's what the Constitution says, and we've got a copy right here. It's hard to see, but we don't have a camera operator to go in for a close-up. It's an old version going back to the 1930s, but the definition of treason has been there from the beginning in 1787.
Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, the states, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act, or on confession in open court.
And if anyone thinks that treason can occur only in wartime, or be committed only by people who have sworn an oath to the Constitution, he is wrong. Any person can be convicted of treason against the United States at any time. The constitutional definition is quite clear.
Rick, the information we have discussed so far about the CFR and the Bilderbergs and their plans for world government is probably new to most Americans, because these groups control the mainstream media.
That's right, Dick. They don't want us to know.
And the way they control it is from the inside. Over 200 CFR members have or had supervisory or influential positions in the national media, including the New York Times, Washington Post, the major networks, Fox, CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, etc., including National Public Radio, PBS, and major magazines.
And this has been going on since at least 1915, when the Morgan interests bought out the 25 most influential newspapers to, quote, properly supervise and edit information regarding things of national and international nature considered vital, unquote, to their interests.
Those 25 newspapers are still in business today and still run by those with a vested interest in determining the information available to us and what we think about it.
And that is why, since the CFR was created in 1921 and the Bilderberg Group in 1954, there has not been one single word published in any major newspaper or magazine indicating that either one of those organizations even exists, never mind what their mission is. Not 1 second of time has been given over to them on any television or radio station, including CBS's 60 Minutes, ABC's 2020, Dateline NBC, Nightline, and other shows pretending to be based on investigative reporting.
Think of those veteran television news journalists like Richard C. Hotlett, Marvin Kalb, Daniel Shore, Leslie Stahl, Diane Sawyer, Barbara Walters, Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, and Walter Cronkite. These are the correspondents you've watched for years and grown to trust to deliver the news honestly. When he was the anchor for the CBS Evening News from 1962 to 1981, Walter Cronkite was known as the most trusted man in America. But all of them are members of the CFR, and none of them would ever dare mention the CFR or the Bilderbergs on the air. Lou Dobbs is the one major media anchor who reports on the North American Union and other taboo subjects. He is not a CFR member, yet even Lou Dobbs dares not mention the CFR or the Bilderbergs.
Dick, what do you suppose would happen if any one of those journalists wanted to host a documentary program on the Bilderberg Group?
He or she would not even get to first base, because every TV network is run by members of the CFR. The CFR in turn is run by the Rockefellers. Imagine that the journalist pushes his superiors hard. He will never be allowed to speak a single word on the air about the Bilderbergs. And if he tries to go to the public, he will be quietly sidelined and even fired. He would be blackballed in his profession.
And suppose a non-journalist asked a question about the CFR during a press conference, as Alex Jones did when George Bush was governor of Texas during a Bush rally and speech in 1998 at a DuPont facility.
The victory will be an endorsement of a philosophy. I believe in my heart of hearts the victory in 1998 is going to be good for Texas, and that's the most important thing about the campaign.
Shouldn't we abolish the Federal Reserve and the CFR? That's the real reality that none of you will talk about, and most of you are members. That's what's destroying this country, Governor. Don't you stand for America, sir? What about the Federal Reserve and the CFR? You people are being lied to. This country's been taken over by Europe, and I'm being drug out. Laugh at it. It's funny, isn't it? Let's grab an arm.
The cameraman was threatened while he filmed the entire incident. The Texas police escorted Jones outside, where he was handcuffed. Later, Jones was driven around the area for half an hour and then tossed out on the side of the road like so much garbage.
The CFR derives much of its treasonous power from its control of the media. Richard Sallant, former president of CBS News, said, "Our job is to give people not what they want, but what we decide they ought to have." And David Rockefeller, ever so pleased with such cooperation from the media, made this statement:
We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the work is now much more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries.
Rick, that's an extraordinary statement. Mr. Rockefeller is saying that only the bankers are fit to rule the world. Well, we are not here to be ruled, and not by the bankers or anyone else.
Dick, that is why we Americans wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776, why we pledged our property and our lives, and why we went to war against King George III of England. It was to be free, not to be ruled.
If you saw anything in Part 1 that surprised or even shocked you, hold on to your hats for Parts 2 and 3, 'cause you ain't seen nothing yet.